Hello. There's a reason why some women are still single in their 30s. It lies, I believe, in psychology, but also in their blindness of their own problems. They see the speck in the eye of others, but they do not see the beam in their own eye. To begin with, I will briefly describe a couple of examples from my life. The girl Katya, whom I met in Sokolniki, refused to read the book Thiaoouba, The Golden Planet because she had already spent 5 years of her life on her religion. I understood then that subconsciously she was afraid that it could turn out that she had wasted all those years for nothing. But in fact, this is all part of our lesson in this universe. And she would have wasted those 5 years only if she refused to learn the provided life lessons. As for the book of Thiaoouba, she could have learned a lot of interesting things for herself. Then she wrote me that I was too creative. But she herself only spoke about some Buddhist temple behind Sokolniki Park for the duration of all 20 minutes of our short walk. Despite all this, I was ready to meet with her again and have a normal walk and talk on various topics, including love and romance. But she was of a different opinion. Moreover, she wrote to me only when I decided to ask her about the temple, for some reason realizing that then she would write me back and confirm that at least this was really her phone number. She did tell me that one of the reasons she didn't want to see me anymore was the fact that I had a lot of psychological problems. And that was true at that time, just as it was true that the absence of a girlfriend was one of the key reasons for my insecurities and worries, which manifested themselves in what Katya understood as psychological problems. She was the first girl who agreed to talk to me, and it is not surprising that I began to get a little worried, and I did not really know what to talk about. The fact is that on the subsequent dates that never happened, I would most likely open up, and if she gave me a chance, then I might no longer be having any psychological problems at all. After all, in the end, I did learn to live more or less calmly without a girlfriend or love. This is followed by the girl D, I'll hide her real name, who walked with shelter dogs on weekends near Ostankino. She was not interested in reincarnation and the topic of auras, at least in terms of acquiring general knowledge in order to expand her horizons of knowledge. No one forces her to thoroughly study reincarnation and auras, for example. It's like not teaching about the basics of how our body works, or about the composition of the food we eat. By the way, many do not learn those basics, and I caught myself in this mistake as well. And yes, I made a big mistake when, for some reason, I continued to tell her about auras. Even so, she said earlier that she was not interested in it. And worst of all, I did not start to inquire about her life, when she told me that it was easier for her to be with animals than with people, thus opening the door for personal questions. But then again, we could have talked about all this on a second date. On that day, I just wanted to relax. That's why I said in the video about dating that on different days people can behave differently, and therefore it is better to meet several times before drawing conclusions about the person. Another girl completely lied to me about her work and stopped writing to me after I refused to go to cafes and restaurants with her, wanting to spend more time in nature. Based on what she told me, there's some chance her motives could be far more dangerous than eating at my expense and lying about her job. Then a woman Oля is next. She does not want to wait until the other person changes his errors, if she can find someone now. But then why didn't she, in her 30s, had a boyfriend or a husband when we met? In fact, she was single for at least a year. Moreover, she went on dates to Izmailsky Park during the COVID summer. How is it that she didn't find her boyfriend now, that summer, if that's such a trivial thing for her. She also had problems and I was ready to help her and see if I could live with them. For example, at one time she began to randomly gesticulate with her hands, talking emotionally about something, and her facial expressions at that moment became similar to the facial expressions of a woman who dogmatically was telling me some things about the Bible. It is difficult for me to describe the picture in words, but both were clearly in their imagination at that moment. One thing I can say for sure, that facial expression with eyes almost rolled up greatly reduced Ollie's sexuality in my eyes at that moment. But as I said, I was ready to try to build a relationship with her, try to help her if I could, and see what happens. She, like other single women in their 30s, still coveting a prince on a white horse, but unwilling to make a reasonable effort to help a person become that prince on a horse. No, she did not. So, in my experience, it seems that many do not want to understand that they themselves have problems, but at the same time they look at problems in other people and do not want to be with them because of their issues. They want to have everything already prepared for them without trying to help people. The medal has two sides. On one side, my mistakes. On the other, the mistakes of the girls. But also do not forget that all actions have consequences. For example, a person may well learn to live happily when he does not have a second half, which does not mean, of course, that a person should not look for love. He just continues to live happily and optimistically, regardless of whether he has someone or not. But then a person will not be able to fully learn communication and social skills if almost no one wants to talk to him. Only about 1 out of 100 girls would agree to get acquainted with me, and even if I could somehow remain optimistic after so many rejections, it definitely did not give me the communication skill that is so necessary when that rare girl finally decides to talk to you. I thought to just start talking to girls so that I could at least get some social experience. I tried asking girls sitting alone in crowded public parks if they perhaps wanted to keep me company and talk a little bit on different topics. Only one girl agreed, and even she was a student from Columbia. On social networks such as VK, the situation is roughly the same. I wrote to a huge number of girls and only a few of them answered me. I texted with them for a while, but this can hardly be called normal communication. Plus, texting will not give the skill of verbal communication for obvious reasons. I understand, of course, that many people have their own worries and not everyone can give a stranger a few minutes of their time, during which they sit on a bench in the park. But then a lot of people just don't want to be friendly. They don't want to learn something new from strangers and give them something back. And the question is, how am I supposed to learn to talk when almost everyone rejects me? Then there's the army question. For the reasons of my knowledge and beliefs acquired from Thiaoouba and in the course of my life, I am not going to go and kill innocent people. This is definitely my right. But for the sake of interest, let's ask the question, for whom to go to war? To protect girls, many of whom did not want to help in a difficult moment, many of whom treated me with contempt simply because I politely and respectfully asked them if we could talk a bit and get acquainted, in case they didn't have a husband or a boyfriend. Some girls wrote to me that the so-called type does not suit them, and also that money is important to them. And the question is, do they think that their rich man, the so-called prince on a white horse, will go to the front to protect them? I think he'll just leave to live abroad, maybe even without the girlfriend. After all, other countries are also full of their own gold diggers. Then it is worth remembering that we live on a planet of the first category, and here one can hardly find ideal people. Each person has their own problems. Perhaps, instead of rejecting the person because of their issues, you should first try to help him and see if the person can change. To be fair, there are exceptions. I myself did not continue to talk with a girl named Luba because of the many red flags. But I tried to point out to her her mistake and did not abruptly cut off our communication, for which, by the way, she thanked me in her own way. But still, she refused to accept that she had made a mistake, and that was another red flag: inability to admit her mistakes and learn from them. Thanks for watching and have a nice day, everyone.